Hello, everyone, and happy Friday, and welcome back to This Week with Mallory. I'm going to try and play our video. If it doesn't work, I'm not Senator McMorrow, but I'm trying my best. Well, I got it to work. So, well, hello, everyone, and happy Friday, and thank you for being with us today. Today, we are back with one of our special editions of our coffee hours. And this week, we are lucky enough to be joined with Caitlin from the Birmingham Museum. So I will let her introduce herself.
Hi, friends. My name is Caitlin Donnelly. I'm a museum specialist here in the wonderful Birmingham Museum in Birmingham, Michigan. I always have to point that out because we get tagged on Twitter and Facebook all the time for the other Birminghams. And I like to think that perhaps people confuse them with us sometimes too. But we are the one in Michigan. And I am here just to kind of share part of our current exhibit, which is called Beyond Suffrage, Empowering Birmingham's Women, where we're talking about kind of some of these untold stories of women in Birmingham.
Yeah,
and I'm
all
going
right.
to go ahead and
bring
sharing the screen now. Awesome. All right, so here's our exhibit graphic featuring the one and only Martha Baldwin. And we really started on this journey with a really basic question that we had all these stories about, the men who held political power in Birmingham or who owned land in Birmingham, but those men had families, they had children, they had people working for them. What were their stories? And we started off with just a super basic question is we have one of the first houses built in Birmingham on our property. It's the John West Hunter House. And we talk a lot about John West Hunter when we give tours of that house, but he moved here with a wife. They had kids. And we realized we didn't even know his wife's name. And so that kind of started this thinking of kind of looking beyond the stories of Birmingham that we knew and trying to uncover just some of these more possibly everyday stories, but a lot of these women were really involved in a lot and they were all beneath the surface, just waiting for us to kind of tap into their stories and do some more investigation. So let's go ahead and then start with the question of John West Hunter's wife. And if you're interested in kind of the history of Birmingham before white settlement in the region, my boss, Leslie Pilak, the director of the Birmingham Museum, just did a fantastic talk with the Baldwin Public Library a couple months ago about the Native Americans of the area. And so that is available on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel if you're interested in that. But we're going to start with the early 1800s. And who was John West Hunter's wife? And this was a really interesting question because we discovered not only her name and where she came from, but the fact that she traveled with her two unmarried sisters to the area that would one day become Birmingham. So the map here, I have the first four land purchases in what would become Birmingham. And so Margaret Hunter, Prindle Hunter, moved with her husband John in that lower right-hand corner of the map. But we sometimes have this idea from media like Little House on the Prairie and stuff that, these settlers moving west were rugged individualists and, all they had was their immediate family with them, if that. But in truth, a lot of these people moved with their entire extended families. In fact, John West Hunter moved with his parents and all of his siblings. And Margaret Prindle Hunter brought her two unmarried sisters along too. So you can imagine you're moving to the middle of nowhere. You're going to be having a family. You probably need the support just to maybe even provide some childcare every once in a while, a shoulder to lean on, someone to vent to every once in a while. And so she brought her sisters Olive and Sarah Marie, who was sometimes called Mariah in the historical records. So that was also a confusing bit. We would see Sarah Marie and also Mariah, and we thought they were two people at first, but it turns out they're one person. And what also caused some confusion in our records too is, because of this concept of coverture in the 1800s, and really this wasn't completely gone away until the 1970s, a wife's identity, property, wealth was all kind of subsumed under her husband's. So in newspaper records, all you'll see is, Mrs. John Smith did this. Well, if you have two John Smiths that live in the same city and they're both married, you have two different people called Mrs. John Smith running around and doing two completely separate things. So we always ask people, when we do these talks and stuff like that, if you're involved in an organization that still refers to women in that very traditional way, with all due respect, stop it. That makes our job so much harder in the future. But we were piecing together this history of the Prindles, and we also came across information that they were probably very well educated women as well when they came out here. Their mother was a debutante in New York City, which meant that they probably had certain privileges growing up. And so, again, we sometimes think of people moving west as, dirt poor farmers looking to make a better life. Sometimes that's true, but I think in the Prindle sisters' case, that wasn't the whole story. And so moving on into the future of Birmingham, we're still a village. Birmingham does not become a city until 1933. We have who I call the patron saint of Birmingham, Martha Baldwin. And I'm only slightly joking there. Pretty much everything that you think of now when you think of Birmingham probably goes all the way back to Martha Baldwin. So our current motto is a walkable community. Martha Baldwin was responsible for getting sidewalks installed in Birmingham. If you've ever been to Greenwood Cemetery, Martha Baldwin had a big hand in making that, in caring for it in perpetuity, and it's still cared for today by the same organization that she set up. We had a school in Birmingham called Baldwin School, because she was first and foremost an educator. She became a teacher after high school. She was kind of trying to raise money to go to college. And she didn't have, a serious relationship at that time. So she's like, well, I'll become a career woman. And so the photo on the left is actually a photo of her at Norvell School in Detroit. She became principal.
Sorry for a second. I think it might not be showing on the screen. I think it might just be still on the original title. I don't know if there's a different screen.
Oh.
There we go. Okay.
Sorry. All right. So I had to minimize it. That's all right. Cool. All right. So it's up there now. Fantastic. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah. So as I was saying, Martha Baldwin actually became a teacher in the Detroit School District right around the time when Michigan started changing its laws, requiring more students to go to school for longer. So suddenly there was this huge need for teachers and principals. So she got kind of shoved into that position pretty early on. And being a principal at that time was still kind of a boys' club. So unfortunately, she brought in all these new ideas, all these new pedagogical methods. She improved the school, and then she was kind of forced to go to a lesser performing school and let one of her male colleagues take over her high performing school. And this experience kind of stuck with her entire life. She remembered going to school herself and kind of the differences between girls and boys when they attended school. And so in her will, she died in 1913. In her will, she set aside money for a new school in Birmingham. And she was very specific as to what the school would be called. It would be named after her, first and foremost. But secondly, that it would have equal facilities for both men and women. So, kind of today, too, you see this in some districts. They'll have a lot of male athletic programs, but very few female athletic programs. And, a lot of times the excuse they give is one of, oh, well, we don't have enough facilities to do both. And, we'd have to raise taxes if we want to equal ones. And no one wants that. Martha knew that that was going to come, and she's like, nope, not on my watch. So Baldwin School was very progressive for its time. It had equal gym, locker room, and shower facilities for both men and women. And indeed, women's athletics in Birmingham was very strong by then and continuing on even today at Groves and Seaholm. It's very strong. And she also included a little bit of a threat in her will too, because she wanted this school to be built. And so she's like, hey, if you don't lay the cornerstone within 3 years, all this money is going to go to the parks department. As we'll see, actually, I think in the next slide, she was really, really good at laying down threats. So another big thing that she's known for today is the library, the Baldwin Public Library here in Birmingham. And it started in 1869. So we're talking after the Civil War. This is a time when people are trying to get back to normal. They're really trying to move the nation forward from this horrible thing that everyone had gone through. And the library movement was a big part of that. It exploded post Civil War, and women were the driving factor in that. So, on this slide here, I have the 19 original members of the Library Association. 10 of those names are women. And as time would move forward, more and more and more women became involved, whereas men kind of dropped off and found other civic organizations to be involved in. And so every one of these 19 people contributed $2.50, which would buy you a good pair of boots back then. So it wasn't an insignificant amount of money. But with that, they bought 48 books that they shared amongst themselves. And then they would open it up for subscriptions for people. You could pay $1 a year and have access to this library. And so the photo I have is Library Hall in Birmingham, which was built in the latter half of the 1800s. And the story of how that was built was also a Martha Baldwin threat. When the Library Society was first born, she was secretary of the organization. And so she went to the city and she's like, hey, I bought this piece of land. We're going to build a library on it. But also, let's make it a joint organization with the village. So you can have village offices and stuff there too. So come in, join me, we'll both pool our money. And the men who were on this village council were like, nah, that's silly. We're not going to do that. And Martha was like, okay, well, we're going to build a library regardless. So, but we're just women building it. So, gosh, it's just going to be such an eyesore. It's going to be plywood and sheet metal. Hope you're okay with that, downtown Woodward. And even back then, Birmingham had some very bougie pretensions. So the men got right in line and they built Library Hall, which served the community until the early 1900s when the village voted to make the Library Association the public library. And in 1926, a couple of years after Martha died, they opened the Baldwin Public Library, named after her because she was the driving force in it through the entire thing. And another thing that Martha was super involved in, particularly towards the end of her life, was suffrage. So she was a member of the Michigan Equal Suffrage Association, And she traveled as the Michigan delegate to several of their meetings, including in 1906, where she got a chance to meet Susan B. Anthony, the Reverend Anna Shaw, and the Reverend Antoinette Blackwell. And she went to the State Resolutions Committee as an officer in 1907 and 1908. She really only stopped attending these meetings starting in 1911, when she started to be very ill and she wasn't able to travel. But at the 1913 Michigan Equal Suffrage Association's meeting, this was held after she had died. But the delegations from all over the state called out Birmingham as a progressive town that was ahead of its time and gave a special commendation for Martha as well. So Martha Baldwin pretty much did everything. Also had a child army, which I always like to mention because my boss doesn't like it when I refer to her child army. But she basically bribed all the school kids in the area to like pick up trash and help beautify the community. So moving on from that, we have some immigrant stories here in Birmingham. And one of those is a woman named Gittel Fenhelder Levinson. And if the name sounds familiar, that's going to circle back. But she immigrated from what is now Russia in the late 1800s. Russia had a lot of pogroms going on back then. And so a lot of Jews in Russia were getting out, and a lot of them were coming to the US. Gittel got on the boat and she basically never saw her parents again. She traveled as a young teen to America by herself. She didn't speak a word of English. She had a brother waiting for her in Detroit, so he helped her get acclimated. And there in Detroit, she met a man named Maury Levinson. And he was taking part in a program that the United States government was putting on at the time, trying to help these Jewish immigrants become business owners in America. So Maury got a loan, I think it was $5, and he started peddling his wares around the Oakland County region. And the residents of Birmingham liked him so much that they actually invited him to settle in the village and open up a shop there. They were tired of waiting for him to come by every couple weeks, and they wanted to shop with him whenever they wanted to. And so he and Gittel settled in Birmingham and opened the very first department store in Birmingham, and it was called Levinson's Department Store. Their children attended schools in both Birmingham and down in Detroit, where there was a large Jewish community. In fact, they would travel there quite often to buy kosher foods. But their daughter Bess married a man with the last name Levin. And her two of her sons, Sandra and Carl, became very, very influential in Oakland County politics. So thanks to Gittel Levinson, we have the Levin family dynasty in Oakland County, which is pretty cool. And if you're more interested in that too, we also have a video on both our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. I'm going to keep on coming back to those, where members of the Levin and Levinson family actually came in and shared their recollections and stuff with us. And that's super cool if you're interested in that family, if you're interested in the Jewish experience in Birmingham and in Oakland County. And of course, once the 19th Amendment was passed, women got involved in politics almost right away. And I think it's a good bit of nuance to put on this, that when the 19th Amendment was passed, it really just guaranteed voting rights for white women. African American individuals really didn't have full voting rights until the 1968 Civil Rights Amendment. There was Jim Crow laws holding people down, preventing them from voting in various parts of the country. And for instance, in 1920, when the 19th Amendment passed, Native Americans weren't even citizens of the United States. I mean, take a minute to try to contort your logic into the pretzels necessary to justify that. But yeah, so that's a good bit of nuance just to remember when we're talking about the 19th Amendment. But in Birmingham, women were already really interested in making a difference in their communities as they were everywhere. A lot of them jumped right into running for office. And one of those was a woman named Hope Ferguson Lewis. She originally attended U of M, like a lot of students from Birmingham, going all the way back to the mid 1800s. Students were almost on a direct pipeline to the U of M, and she was one of them. She originally wanted to study economics, but her father convinced her to become a teacher, seeing that as a better occupation for a woman. She was super interested in women's suffrage, even from a really young age. And in 1927, she was the first woman elected to the village government as a trustee. And this was right before Birmingham became a city. So it was a really pivotal time in Birmingham's history. She was also director of the community house. She co-founded a diaper laundry business, which, I mean, if any of you have had kids, young kids, and you want to try to help the environment and not use disposable diapers, you know how overwhelming it can be to try to keep those reusable diapers laundered. She helped a lot of parents out a lot, and she helped found Birmingham Senior Center as well. So really pivotal for both the history of Birmingham moving forward and the community itself. And the last woman I want to talk about, she is actually the reason why I'm here talking to you today, and that is Marion Colesby Allen. She was the daughter of the village official Warren Colesby, who took off a lot after Martha Baldwin. He would rather ask forgiveness than permission. He just sort of did what he wanted to. And she married her husband, Harry Allen, in 1914. And in fact, the lower picture there was just her. That is her on her wedding day. And the other picture is her with a group of friends. And so she helped preserve the little red schoolhouse that sat on the site of what is now the Allen House. It was the schoolhouse that Martha Baldwin started out teaching in, and it had been a residence for a while. But by the time Harriet and Marion moved in, they had to tear it down. But she wanted to preserve as much as she could. So if you come to the museum, we'll show you the red bricks out front that are from the Little Red Schoolhouse. Her son got polio in 1926. She was really big on helping his rehabilitation and making life in the city for both her son and other kids who had some disabilities just a little bit easier. This is before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if you were confined to a wheelchair or you used crutches, life was pretty difficult. And she wanted to help make that just a little bit smoother. And she, at the end of her life, preserved her house, the Allen House, as a historical site. And according to ghost hunters, she is still here today, making sure we are taking care of her house. So if you think about it, that kind of makes her my boss. And that's why I wanted to end on her. Shout out to my boss, Marion Allen. Please don't haunt me. So that is the end of my short little presentation. If you're interested in any of the stories that I talked about and want to know more, and we have so many more stories here at the Birmingham Museum, I have our hours on the screen now. We are open Tuesday through Friday, 1 to 4 p.m. Admission $7 for adults, $5 for students and seniors. Members and children under 5 are free. We also have upcoming talks at the Baldwin Public Library, and these are being held over Zoom, so you don't have to be a resident of Birmingham, nor do you have to be in the area. You can tune in from the Arctic if you want to. April 7th is going to be our next talk. We just missed the talk yesterday on Birmingham's Women Aviators, given by my colleague, Donna Cassicelli. It was super interesting. Hopefully we'll have that on our YouTube and Facebook pages within a week. We always try to record these talks. And April 7th is our next one. It is the first Thursday in April. And I am giving a talk on how Birmingham was once America's Shetland pony capital. Bet you didn't know that. And May 5th, we're doing Birmingham Stories of War and Service. And then June 3rd, we are giving a presentation on Juneteenth and the Birmingham connection to the Underground Railroad, which is another story that we've recently had time to really dive into and really uncover is the Black history of Birmingham and how strong of a connection we had both to the abolition movement and the Underground Railroad. So that one is going to be super fascinating. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure to be here and talking to you today.
Yeah, that was awesome. As a big history buff, I was really excited when we got the chance to partner with you guys and learn about women's history, especially during Women's History Month,
Oh yeah,
in our community in Birmingham and learning about the women that have shaped, the city who it is to where it is today.
right. Yeah, and I think this is really applicable history even to other communities as well. If you have a library in your community, I bet you a group of women were instrumental in founding that. If you have a lot of civic organizations, women were probably behind all of that, even before, women had the ability to be active in politics. Oh, and I guess I should mention too, you can follow us on social media. I've mentioned Facebook. We do have a YouTube channel, and, talk to me on our Twitter page. And tag the other Birmingham museums and ask them about us, because that would
Yeah.
really make my day.
Yeah, I'll make sure to leave all of your social media and the webpage too in the comments and in our um kind of presentation of today. So I will make sure everyone has all that necessary information. But
Oh,
yeah, I
thank
just want
you.
to say thank you again for providing this awesome presentation and helping us learn more about the awesome women of Birmingham and Oakland County.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy the fantastic weekend that we're gonna
I
have.
know, 60 degrees this weekend. I have we're in Michigan when everyone I talked to this week was like, it's going to be 60 on Saturday. So
Everyone's gonna be out in shorts and tank tops.
yeah, Michiganders were built different.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you again, and we will see you all next week.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.